All right, we are good to go. Welcome to Five Questions, Carol.
Hi.
And Carol, you're on the West Coast. I know you're in Pacific time, but are you around the San Francisco or the LA region?
I am in San Diego,
San
California.
Diego. Option number three then. All right, you ready to dive in? What question do you want to start off with?
I am. Okay, so my first question is everything feels like a tension, a tightrope of sorts between deciding and allowing, between intention and surrender. How do we best strike the balance that ushers in our best experience?
Ooh, that was very well asked. So how do you find the balance? To me, that what it sounds to me, what you're asking is like, how do we find the balance between like striving for and allowing? Does that kind of summarize what you're asking?
Yes, but also, and yes, and
Yes.
I I'm curious about like when we set out an intention, just having the intention and holding that intention, like how much of that we need to do before we just let that go.
Yeah, so I would say when it comes to like the intention, everything we do, it's all about the energy we come at that thing with, right? So, for example, when you're trying to write a book from the energy of, it's got to be this long, it's got to sell 1,000 copies, it's got to change the world, I've got to get it done in a week, you're going to create a very different book than a book that you're going to write sheerly from the pleasure of writing the book for the fun and enjoyment of writing a book, right? That's the difference between writing a book from a place of stress and pressure and disalignment and writer's block versus doing it for the joy of the process, which puts you in that connected and aligned place, which is really going to allow your book to flow. So the same thing applies to everything, including your intent setting. So when it comes to intent
Mm.
setting, what you want to do is you want to come at it from the energy of, how does Abraham Hicks say it? Satisfied with what is, but excited for more. So
Ooh.
when you have an intent, a desire that pops in your mind, you want to be able to take pleasure in that desire, not from the energy or the aspect of, I need to have that thing now that I realize that I want it, because that's desperation, that's attachment to outcome, that's need. Instead, you want to play in the dream of the desire. You want to play in the dream of the possibility of the desire. You want to milk the desire, not for the havingness of the desire, but really for the enjoyment of the being able to tune in to the concept or the possibility or just the fact that that desire exists. So, I think you're in the collective and you've heard, my billionaire story, right? Where I watched Successions, I really enjoyed it. I got fascinated by what a billionaire lifestyle looks like. I started watching YouTube videos of $50 million mansions and mega yachts. And then literally 4 or 5 months later, I was invited in Fort Lauderdale to come hang out on a mega yacht, right? So I wasn't watching these YouTube videos to try to manifest being a billionaire or $50 million mansions. I was watching them from the energy of just the pleasure of those things. And by being in the energy of the pleasure of those things, the experience of those things began to trickle into my reality.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I just got
Good.
goosebumps.
Does that
I
does
feel
that kind of answer what you were asking? Does that go where you want it to go a little bit?
yeah, it does, especially the play in the dream of the desire part. Like I like that a lot. Like that feels like something that when I'm too attached to something, I can start to just play there.
And
That feels
there's
good.
such a huge difference when you have a desire in mind, focusing on the energy of, how do I make it show up? What do I need to do to bring it into my reality? Like, there's such a difference in coming at a desire from that energy of effort and the need to make it happen versus the energy of just taking pleasure of the existence of that thing, even if it's not in my physical reality yet.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Such a great
Oh,
question.
I love that a lot.
Awesome. Good. What else you got for
um,
me?
okay. Well, I guess I'm going to skip a question because this one feels related there.
Okay.
I love my morning practice. Like I love it. And I feel in a lot of ways very attached to it. Like if I don't do this or this, then I feel like, oh, I didn't do that. So how can I tell whether the voice in my head who sometimes tries to deviate from it is inspired action versus part of my ego trying to hold me back?
Yeah, so the simple answer is based on how it all feels, right? So when it comes to morning practices, a lot of people do a morning practice because they believe I'm supposed to do a morning practice, right? So a lot of people don't put much thought into why they're doing a morning practice in the first place. So the goal of your morning practice should be to feel good. How high can I get on that emotional guidance scale? Right. So different people, they take, oh, I'm going to use Robin Sharma's morning practice, or I'm going to use Tony Robbins' morning practice. And they don't self-reflect in terms of, what's the purpose of their own morning practice and what can it look like for them. So I tell people that everybody's morning practice, A, should be unique to them, and B, doesn't need to be the same thing every day, right? Because if your goal is to get as high as you can in the way you feel on a 0 to 10 scale, today you might wake up and be inspired to go lay at the beach. You might be inspired to make a green juice. You might be inspired to listen to some good dance music. Today, that might be what makes you feel good. Tomorrow, when you wake up, maybe yoga is what's going to make you feel good. Maybe some journaling is what's going to make you feel good. So, what I would suggest from the context of a morning practice is when you wake up in the morning from that place of alignment, tune in and say, okay, what is going to make me happy in this moment? What's going to help uplift my alignment and my vibration, and what can I go do? So it's not so much about sticking to the exact same routine every day, but it is committing to some kind of practice if you know that that practice is going to feel good. A lot of people are shooting themselves in the foot because their morning practice doesn't feel good and it feels like effort, and it's not boosting their vibration in any way because of it.
Ooh, okay, then I have a follow-up to this one.
Okay.
I I've designed my morning practice out of my 2 point out of like the best version of myself, that so like trying to kind of not trying but quantum leaping into like what would she be doing every single day, like what would
Yeah.
she be doing if I had my perfect life already, what would happen every day for me. And so that's what I do in my morning practice. So ooh, this feels like another tension then, like between what makes me happy and how much do I step into
So
that skin.
here's how I would tweak that. Here's how I would fine tune that. And again, this more advanced law of attraction stuff, it is about these little fine tunings that make a big difference. So instead
Yes.
of asking the question, what would she be doing? Ask the question, how would she be feeling? And and what is it that I need to do or can do to tune into that feeling set point?
Oh man, that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah, and it's a very minor adjustment, right? But
Yeah.
it's law of attraction. It's all about, and we talked about quantum leaping, last month or a few weeks ago in the collective. We had a 90-minute call on that. It's in the library. When we talked about that quantum leaping process, it was about identifying that future version of you and then you embodying that version of you here and now, right? It's about
Hmm.
taking that version of you and bringing them into your present moment by being that person. And the first and foremost, most important part of that is not doing what they're doing because that's just what they do, but it's literally embodying the state of being of that person, right? That's their vibrational signature. And if you can hold that vibrational signature for yourself for a good enough amount of time, then your physical reality will remold itself and match, the new you that you're being, which is the you that's experiencing what you want to be experiencing.
Ooh, I love that so much.
Yeah, it's
I've
such a
I've
fun process.
I've felt so many big shifts in just like doing what I think she's gonna be doing. Like I'm so excited to just try to feel what she would be feeling.
Yeah, that was probably one of our best calls in the collective to date and one of the most watched calls.
Yeah, amazing.
Awesome. I love your
Um,
questions. Throw another one at me.
okay. Um, all right. This one's a little more specific to something I'm experiencing right now, but I'm noticing a little bit of pain and negative emotions surrounding a need to be right. Something that I use the belief tree on, and I've tried to tap on, and I've traced it down to this need to be listened to. But it keeps coming up, and I don't know, like, why, especially like the last 2 weeks, it keeps coming up. How do you suggest releasing something that you've tried to release, but it keeps coming up in your physical reality?
So there's a couple of things to look at. So one, it sounds to me like you've got a feeling of like I'm not being heard, like an unheard feeling.
Yeah,
Does that sound right?
yeah.
And
And I
then
know that it's like a conscious thing. I can reason my way out of it, but
feel it. Yeah.
I still feel it.
So this need to be right. What is right?
Um, I and that's why I think it's like a need to be listened to.
Yes. Yeah.
More than it is a need to be right.
Yeah, because if you listen to Bashar, you understand, or Elon, that all truths are true, right?
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as right or wrong. There's just a belief that I choose to believe it, right? So
Hmm.
different people can choose different truths, and everybody has the ability and the right to choose what truths are truth for them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that leads us to the first part that I mentioned, was this belief or this feeling of being unheard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 0 to 10, how strong is that unheard feeling?
The last week and a half, like 10.
Okay. And if we use that process a little bit, I feel like I'm not being heard because
Things keep happening where people don't hear me and I have to repeat myself, or people, I'm talking, and then people are distracted, and then I notice that they are not listening to me.
okay, so they're not present, they're not grounded, they're not zoned in on you. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because, or that makes me feel, so I've got kids, and sometimes I'm like, go clean up the plate that you left on the counter, and they're so busy in their mind and in their world and doing what they're doing, I have to repeat it like 10 times before they finally get up and go do it, right? So when I do that, that doesn't trigger me, right? So you're being triggered for one reason or another, right? Because of something, there's something underneath this unheardness that's
Yeah.
that's making the unheard, kind of pinch a little bit. So when you're not being heard by these people, how does that make you feel?
Honestly, like I'm a little kid. like
Okay.
I I mean, and I've this came up when I was doing the belief tree too, with I just have these memories of being a little kid in the back of the car trying to tell my parents something, and them not noticing, and giving up and being like, whatever, they're not listening to me, so I'm just going to sit here and read my book or stare
Yeah.
at the window.
And that's a great point. So that's really good self-awareness. So now we're kind of working through those belief tree layers, right? So how would you say that little kid felt when she wasn't being heard in that way?
um like she needed to be bigger,
Okay.
like she needed to be more flashy and like get noticed in a different way.
Okay. So maybe like an unnoticed feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that I'm being unnoticed, that makes me feel
Really small.
small. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we've kind of found the root at the bottom of the tree, right?
Oh yeah, okay, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
that's totally it.
now you're a very beautiful person. You got a very beautiful personality. You've got a very loving personality. I'm sure that your husband is madly in love with you. Your inner being doesn't see you as small. The collective members love that you're in the collective. Would you agree with all of that?
Yeah.
And does
Yeah.
that sound like a small person to you?
No.
And I'm pretty sure that you being a teacher, that all of your students look up to. I bet you're an amazing teacher, that you really connect with the kids. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I love I part of me feels now, oh, you just made something that question just crack something open because I feel like distance learning, I don't get to see them listen to me as much as I do on a normal basis. So it feels like maybe that's been hiding this feeling from me. Oh my God, maybe that's why it's coming up so much right
Awesome. That's amazing
now.
because now it gives you a chance to let this go. Because you're not small, you're big. You've always been big. And just because your mom and dad couldn't see it, just because at some points friends are tuned out and don't hear you, none of that is an indication that you're small.
Yeah.
Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Awesome. And can you give yourself permission to let that go?
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
and how does that feel?
Ooh, really good. Like I'm like shaking. And it feels like I've let go of something that I didn't know was attached to me.
Yeah, and that's very common. Most people are carrying around this baggage from childhood, and don't realize or recognize that it's there, and it's always weighing on your alignment and impacting our vibration. So you letting this go is going to create a positive shift in your physical reality too. So congratulations.
Ooh, thank you.
Good.
Thank you for that.
And do you feel lighter now?
Yeah, I do. I'm shaking a little bit, but I do feel lighter.
Awesome.
How'd you do? It's like I don't. I tried to do that for myself, Nick. I tried.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, remember, so with this belief tree process, and those who aren't familiar with the belief tree process, it's in chapter 5 of the book, and it's something we use a lot in the collective. There's recordings that explain it. So remember, I've been using this process for years and years and years and years, and you guys are pretty, less than a year new to this process, and the more you use it, the more you practice it, the more you're going to be able to decipher emotions to these perspectives. So that's one part of it. Second part of it is when it's our own stuff, we're in the energy of the problem, we're in the quicksand. It's always easier when somebody else is kind of looking in, to identify that stuff and help work through it. So we can only get so far with our own stuff, and sometimes getting the help of somebody who's well trained, can get to things so much quicker.
Oh, that was amazing. That was amazing.
And thank you for letting yourself go there, because a lot of people don't have the courage to be vulnerable, and to look at what they have going on. But that's really the key to success, is to be able to go in and tune in. And that's why you shared so many great manifestation stories with the collective, is because you are doing the work and you are stepping into that and you are doing the morning practice. So give yourself a big pat on your back. And I'm sure that your inner being and your parents and your husband are all very proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Should we finish off with one last question?
Yeah, I only have one more question. So, and
Perfect.
actually, it's very related to how you just closed that
Perfect.
because how do I cultivate a stronger connection and knowing when my higher self is speaking to me?
Well, your higher self is always speaking to you. It's always speaking to everybody, right? And I think the more consistently you're in alignment, the less you question. So questioning comes from, you know, kind of mental processing, right? So I've explained in the past how in the old paradigm we function mostly through, mind-based logic, right? And the next step up, is more processing things intuitively and using gut feelings along with mind-based logic. So kind of a combination of the two. The next step up from that, which is what I call being fully in the new paradigm, is really just being in alignment and just acting out of pure impulse. And in that place where you're acting out of just alignment and impulse, the questioning doesn't happen, because you just get an impulse and you're like, oh, I've got the impulse to go shoot a video. I'm going to go do that. Oh, I've got an impulse to go paddleboarding. I'm going to go do that. Oh, I've got an impulse to call this friend. I'm going to do that. So from that place of really stable alignment, you're operating from more of a place of impulse than a place of, is this right? Is this wrong? Did it come from my inner being? Does this make sense up here? There's no more questioning. And that really creates so much more ease in your reality because you just trust and allow and flow and just follow impulses. It simplifies things so much.
Yeah.
Does that answer
And
your question?
so then it's about just like it's F it happy game all day.
Yeah, it's just being happy and saying, what's my next impulse? What's my next impulse, right? That's Bashar's, following your toolkit of highest excitement. I
Yeah.
prefer the word
Yes.
impulse over excitement because the word excitement is a little strong. Because if you've got an impulse to go take a nap, you know, a nap is never something that's exciting for most people. But if it's your highest impulse, then that's what you should be going to do.
How do you identify impulse versus like when something is sway? I don't like. How do you define impulse?
How do you define impulse? It's like just like a feeling, just like a just like, hey, this is what feels next. This was what feels like the best thing. Like when you get hungry, oh, I got an impulse to go to the cupboard and and
Mm,
and grab a piece of pineapple. Right. So I think we're practicing impulses all the time. I just think that because we have, our conscious mind and our ego and our inner critic and all that stuff going on, we allow that to get in the way of these impulses. We doubt our impulses. Animals, they operate purely out of impulse. And the example I use is, when it's time for birds to migrate south, they don't have a phone they pull out of their pocket and check to see if it's the right date to go south, or a reminder that pops up on their phone to tell them to migrate. They just go when they get the impulse to go, right? And I think
yeah.
animals that hunt, they just follow their impulses. Oh, it's time to go that way to go find some food.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a
That's those impulses come from their inner beings, and our inner beings feed us those same impulses all the time.
yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much for playing. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great questions, and we'll see you in the collective call next week.
Yeah. See you next week.
Awesome. Check you later.
Bye, Nick. Thank you.